On the morning of March 29th, 1972, 39-year-old club owner Conrad Greaves would wake up not knowing that it would be his last day on Earth. Hello everybody, welcome to another episode of New York City Crime Spot. We are on East Elmhurst, Queens, New York City. Today discussing the death of nightclub owner Conrad Greaves. Conrad Greaves made his way to the United States from the Virgin Islands. He came here working all types of jobs. He was a janitor, a porter, ultimately becoming a bartender, and deciding that that was the industry that he liked the most. Saving up his money, he finally was able to acquire some clubs of his own. One of the first ones being the Stadium Lounge, which was inside the Stadium Lodge Motel by Yankee Stadium. The more successful he got, the more business ventures he was getting into. Ultimately opening up Conrad's Cloud Room at the El Capitan Motel at 8702 23rd Avenue in Elmhurst, Queens, right by LaGuardia Airport, which is where we are right now, and you might be hearing some planes coming over. Now, I spoke about Conrad Greaves in my recent upload in my interview with one Alfred Caponero, also known as Al Nero. He described him as a fun guy, a nice guy who liked to party, good business owner. But a guy who, unfortunately, in 1971, would start to be extorted by the mob, specifically the Genovese crime family. Even more specifically, Pasquale Macchiaroli, also known as Patty Mac, sometimes referred to as Patty the Pig. And who was Pasquale Macchiaroli? Sometimes referred to as Macchiaroli, sometimes spelled Macchiaroli. Now, Patty Mac was a powerful Genovese soldier. Some people report him to be a captain, although I could not confirm this. He is a man who had rackets up and down the East Coast, New York, New Jersey, Florida. A feared guy who extorted restaurants, nightclubs, and all sorts of industries that he can get his hands on. Let's cross over and let's go over a little criminal biography on Patty Mac. At the time our story takes place, Patty Mac was 50 years old, and he was living at 7703 Elliott Avenue in the Middle Village section of Queens. In the 1960s, he would infiltrate New Jersey. In tandem with John DiGilio, he would extort a man by the name of Herbert Gross, who was a hotel owner and businessman who he himself got involved in loan sharking and numbers and all types of illegal activities. Ultimately, Patty Mac would, with John DiGilio, encroach on his business. Herbert Gross would later become an informant, and he would say this of Patty Mac. He would say that he was scared of him. He was an intimidating guy. But as far as all the mobsters that he came in contact with when he entered a life of criminality, he would say that Patty Mac was by far the most intelligent. Patty Mack was also the owner of a company in New Jersey by the name of Frigid Express, Frigid Freezers. In the early 1970s, he would get in trouble along with his son, John Machiro, who was at that time the president of the company, Frigid Express. They would get in trouble for a scheme involving stealing and not reporting numerous pounds of seafood coming out of piers in Brooklyn and all areas of New York City. They developed this scheme where they were able to get away with not weighing much of the product that they were taking from these piers. And many of the truck drivers that were working for this company would later cooperate and say that Patty Mack told them essentially that it's okay to steal, but whatever you do, you better give 50% to Frigidaire. Meaning you better line me and my son's pockets, or there's going to be big trouble. Now the government claimed that this scheme lined their pockets with as much as $6 million. Let's get a look over here. You're going to hear a lot of noise here because LaGuardia Airport is right on the other side of where we are right now. You guys get to look at another neighborhood in Queens, this one being East Elmhurst. Let's look at some graffiti. In 1975, Patty Mack, along with powerful Genovese capo Jimmy James Napoli, they would be indicted with over 20 more people for their role in a New York and New Jersey numbers scheme, a numbers racket which was said to bring in tens of millions of dollars. As far as Florida goes, he maintained a residence there. He also maintained a residence in New Jersey and, of course, New York, where I just mentioned, in Middle Village. And in the 1970s, when Johnny Sideburns Sorella was getting in trouble for extorting a lot of the parking lots and valet spots in the South Florida area, they said that Sorella was an associate of Patty Mack. So it's quite possible that Patty Mack was lining his pockets from some of these Johnny Sideburns extortion rackets in South Florida. So this is a guy who was very powerful, a guy who was feared, and a guy who essentially made a lot of money looting businesses. In March of '72, Patty Mack is going to get indicted. You see, District Attorney Anthony Lombardino, he was hot on Patty Mack's trail, and a lot of other guys who were extorting a lot of restaurants and bars in the tri-state area, and he was really trying to get Patty Mack. So he's able to indict Patty Mack in March of '72. And the reason why Patty Mack gets indicted for this is because Conrad Greaves, the owner of Conrad's Cloud Room at the El Capitan Motel, started cooperating. You see, he was tired of being extorted as much as $400 a week by Patty Mack and his crew. You see, once they came in there, they made their presence known. If you go back to my interview with Al Nero, who knew Conrad Greaves and Patty Mack, he talks about Conrad's Cloud Room being a regular spot. But as soon as Patty Mack gets in there, it turns into this place where these guys are all of a sudden acting like Major D's. They're hanging out, working security. So they basically completely encroached on Conrad's business, and they were looting it. Conrad, being a guy who came from the Virgin Islands, a hardworking guy, just wanted to do his thing, maybe partied a little bit, but, he worked hard. He was an immigrant that came here, saved up his money. He was tired of it. Now, what he did might have been foolish, but he did what he did. And after midnight on March 30th, after Conrad is at his club on the 29th throughout the night, it gets after midnight, it's now March 30th. And he's right inside this spot right here, where it says King's Inn Family Center. It's now some sort of shelter. This is the former location of the El Capitan Motel, where Conrad's cloud room was located. Put up a picture of what it looked like at the time. So Conrad is going to be working here that night, and he's going to exit. Apparently he's going to get a phone call, and he's going to exit out the side parking lot of this establishment. And while he walks to his car, he's going to get gunned down, and he's going to die on the street right here. Now we're going to go to the side of this building, and we're going to kind of see where this parking lot is. I scoped it out where I believe the location would be. Let's get another look at this building. Former site of the El Capitan Motel. Inside was Conrad's cloud room. A club, a lounge. You'd have live music here. Al Nero would play here. And it's funny, you know, I showed you pictures before of the Stadium Lodge where he had his Stadium Lounge. And he had a lounge here. It's interesting how we look at spots like this and motels like that now as like some low rent shithole, you know, like you wouldn't want to stay at like a little shitty motel by the airport. You don't know what's going on in these places. But back then, you know, as far as I could see, these places weren't looked at like that. They were looked at as like, you know, places that had nice lounges where you can take your girl or your husband and hang out and dance and have some nice drinks and maybe spend the night. And it wasn't looked at as like, oh, I'm going to this little shithole by the airport. You know, these places were like nice little motels, you know. At least that's the picture I'm getting. So Conrad would exit out the cloud room here. And we're going to cross over because there's a parking lot over there with a back door. They said there was a back door to a parking lot that adjoined the motel. And once we'll cross over, we'll take a look at that. Okay, crossing over. In the distance there, you can see the Empire State Building. That's cool, right? So we're looking right here at the cloud room. Former spot of the cloud room, the El Capitan Motel. Let's cross over. Let's take a look right here. So, from what I could see from this building, this is the only back or side door that I could see. And here's a parking lot right here. Now let's go look at the other side in the back and see what's over there. You know how I get guys that get all nerdy about the nitty-gritty details of these properties. I already looked into it, but we'll see if there's another door back here. That might have been a back entrance for him to leave the cloud room. Let's see. Columbo on the scene. So I don't believe there is, based on, you know, me scoping this out before. Okay, so we have an area back here. I don't see a back door here. So it's more likely the case that that side parking lot area right there was where Conrad walked out the back door here to the side parking lot and was gunned down. 39-year-old Conrad Greaves, the man who came from the Virgin Islands and turned into a successful entrepreneur, shot down after cooperating with authorities, after being extorted by Pasquale Hattie Mac Machiro. Shot down right here on the early morning hours of March 30th, 1972. So what's going to become of this case? Let's walk back, and we'll talk about that. So 4 guys are going to be arrested in connection to this homicide. Patty Mac's nephew, Thomas DeLeo. Brothers Ralph and Daniel Jacobson, powerful Jewish loan sharks. 2 guys would also have vicious reputations associated with the Genovese crime family. And the bartender that was inside El Capitan, Conrad's cloud room, bartender by the name of Robert Grimaldi, he would also be arrested, accused of setting up the entire hit on Conrad Greaves. Now they would go to trial for this. The Jacobson brothers, Thomas DeLeo, they would be acquitted. Robert Grimaldi, however, through the testimony of one Teresa Bell, who was working at a little coffee shop they had in there, through her testimony, Robert Grimaldi would be convicted of this and sentenced to 15 years to life. Now, who was Teresa Bell? Well, Teresa Bell, like I said, worked in there in a coffee shop. And she said that on that night, Robert Grimaldi said to her, "Wait in the lobby," as they were walking out together. He said, "No, wait here." And he accompanied Greaves outside. And she said she didn't wait in the lobby. She came around the back to the lot, and she observed the Jacobson brothers shooting Conrad Greaves dead, and Robert Grimaldi there also. During the trial, Thomas DeLeo, it would come out that there was no evidence that he was ever there anywhere, so he would get acquitted first. Ultimately, everyone else got acquitted, but Grimaldi. That is until 1974, when Grimaldi's case got thrown out. Why did it get thrown out? It got thrown out because during the trial, Teresa Bell was saying things like, you know, I was a good girl, you know, I was going to be in the coven to be with nuns, and I was going to have a religious lifestyle, and she was saying all these things that happened that would turn out that they would ultimately, during the appeals, they would say that her testimony, a lot of what she said made no sense. And the prosecution kept saying that she was like a woman of God, she was in the coven, she was in the coven. It turned out she was never in the coven. She had put in some kind of papers to maybe become a nun, but she was not a holy woman, at least not at that point. And a lot of what she was saying didn't make sense. So Grimaldi gets off. So till this day, no one has really been charged with this murder. Thomas DeLeo, who got off, would later be found dead in the trunk in 1974. He would lose his life. Patty Mac's nephew, Thomas DeLeo. And later on in 1978, Patty Mac himself would end up in a trunk. They would find him in a trunk in Canarsie. At Skidmore Avenue and Rockaway Parkway, after he had been missing for 2 weeks, his family would apparently get a call saying where he was by a mysterious caller, and he would be found dead there. Now, why did he get killed? Well, there's a lot of notions that, you know, some people thought he was getting too powerful. He was encroaching in on rackets that were starting to affect other people in the family, and he was maybe bit of a loose cannon. This is a guy who never stopped lining his pockets, who never stopped, you know, getting involved with extorting restaurants and all sorts of businesses, and running his own business out of New Jersey. And numerous indictments over 10 years. I mean, numerous indictments coming down from him. You know, his biography, you know, paints him as somewhat of like a bully, almost a real bully, a guy who just never stopped. And the notion is that Funzi Thierry, guys like Jimmy Knapp, you know, they just came together and said, you know what, this guy's got to go, this is getting a little too much. And it's interesting, in my interview with Al Nero, he would say the same thing. He would say, well, he got too big, you know, he was getting too powerful. That was his notion, so I had to believe that Al Nero heard that from somebody. following year, in 1979, Pasquale Macchiaro's son, John Macchiaro, would also be murdered in Maspeth, outside one of his restaurants. Now, this is a guy who, along with his father, Paddy Mack, was also involved in businesses, and God knows what. You know, he was involved in that Frigidaire business, and who knows what he was doing at the time. There had to be a reason that they wanted him dead, too. These guys seemingly, there was no end to their game. There was no end to the power that they wanted. They wanted to keep extorting businesses. They wanted to keep spreading their influence up and down the East Coast. Very interesting characters in the history of Cosa Nostra. Paddy Mack, a guy I don't believe gets talked about much. Of course, they didn't cover everything here. There was more stuff coming out about him after he died. He was extorting a restaurant called Rainieri Restaurant out in Smithtown, Long Island. The guy there was basically running for his life. He was scared he was going to get whacked by Paddy. Paddy got whacked before that could happen. He just had a vicious reputation. And guys like that, as they say, they don't always last too long. Especially in a family like the Genovese, where, you know, they're often referred to as the Ivy League of Cosa Nostra, right? Don't make too much noise. Don't go around beating people up all the time. Don't go around extorting every fucking business that you can. Don't get indicted a bunch of fucking times. Try not to draw too much attention to yourself. Try not to make too many power moves against other people. It might turn out bad. Now, originally a guy by the name of Marco Macciola would be arrested for his murder, but he would get acquitted in 1980. Later on, cooperating witness Peter Savino in the late 90s, of course, the guy who cooperated against the Chin with the Windows trial, he would claim that Sally Dogs Lombardi killed Pasquale Macchiaro. So who exactly killed him, I don't know. But nonetheless, he would lose his life in March of 1978. Hope you guys enjoyed this story. I hope it was easy to follow. It's very noisy over here, but I did the best I could. You guys have a beautiful week.